to move forward with the recommendation?
Sure. If I could get Dr. Vandekamp, if you're still awake, can you pull up that page of the presentation that has the list of recommendations towards the back? I think it's the third slide from the back of the presentation.
She's pulling it up right now, Dr. Hagman.
And maybe while she's doing that, can somebody tell me what page that is in the presentation so I don't have numbers on my printout here.
Should be 35.
Page number 35 on the presentation, which says final recommendations at the top. I'm just going to go ahead and read through them if I can. You all have it there, and as soon as she can pull it up, then everybody else will be able to see it. So the final recommendations, here it comes. Oh, Ahmed, tricky you. Okay, so there it is right there. The final recommendations are for our TK through 2 classes to go into the AM/PM model. And let me start off by saying that all of these models start with a full-time remote to begin with. But as they open up, as the guidelines permit, TK through 2 will open in a AM/PM model that is outlined.
Except for our preschool, correct?
Preschools, I think, we're going to go into the 212 if I remember, Ed, was that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Good, I didn't have to be corrected 2 times. So the TK through 2 will be an AM/PM model, half the kids in the morning, half in the afternoon. Again, and that's once we deem it's safe to bring those students and the staff, including both teachers and classified staff members, safely back into onto the campus, following all of the guidelines that we discussed earlier. The 3rd grade through 5th will remote start. That's the recommendation. And you can see where they'll step into once the recommendation, or we're able to ease folks back onto campus on slide 19. Grades 6 through 10, again, a remote start with a block schedule in the remote learning. And then on page 24, I think you can see how that will slide back out as we're able to bring kids back onto campus. TK through 3rd SDC, moderate severe, those will come back in after the remote learning in an AM/PM role, and you can see that outlined on slide 26. The grades 4 through 12 SDC, moderate severe, self-contained classroom. It's recommended that after the remote learning, they come back on a 212 model, much in the same way that the preschool students will. And then at Village High School, after the initial remote start, they will come back with a hybrid schedule, a block schedule that fits uniquely to the Village learning environment. So that's the recommendation. Again, keep in mind that all of those recommendations are based on the ability to move into those positions after an initial remote start.
I have a question. Could you just answer the thinking behind having the SDC moderate and severe starting out earlier with what that teacher was saying? Because I totally get what she's saying about them feeling different and not going forward with everyone else. I can totally empathize with that. So can you explain your thought process?
Ed?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thinking around the recommendation, we were really following the guidelines. So for the certain groups that we were thinking about, if we can have those consistent, stable, smaller groups, that was the first group that we were really thinking about. So if we think about our SDC moderate severe classrooms, I would say typically probably 12 students or less. And then also in terms of not just the guidelines, but also just the instructional needs of the students. We truly believe that face-to-face for our most vulnerable students, and we consider our students in the moderate severe programs, would fit that criteria. Coming back in front of a teacher would really be beneficial for them. So that's the original thinking. It's both the county guidelines, being able to follow those guidelines, having the ability to clean. We've talked a lot about that. And I really respect the information and the questions that have come in from our special day class teachers that we need to really consider how we're going to do some of those or follow some of those guidelines for cleaning and disinfecting. And then also, I think we kind of mentioned it tonight, but we've talked a lot about the personal protective equipment that will be needed in order to ensure, again, the safety as our teachers and paraeducators work with our students who have some personal care needs that we need to do for them. So anyway, there's a lot of information that we went through, we processed, and because of those two main factors, following the guidelines and also bringing back our most vulnerable students in a safe manner, that's where that recommendation came from.
Any other questions, comments?
And just one clarification. So we are starting out all remote for all grade levels. If and when the time comes that we have guidelines from the county to reopen, that will be coming back to the board, right? Before any decision is made to do that?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I still have my question. So since we don't have we have guidelines now about what is safe to open school. And we have encouragement from the Alameda County Office of Education jointly with the Alameda County Health Department that openings, having students in school, assuming that you can provide the physical distancing and the cleaning and all of that. What I just am still struggling with, what does that guidance look like? What is the, how are we going to evaluate this every week? We're going to evaluate this every month.
So I meet, and Ed has other meetings as well, but I meet weekly with the Public Health Department leadership group, as well as all the superintendents from Alameda County, where we receive an update from the public health officer, and we get information updates from the county Department of Education as well. And so that's a weekly meeting that I attend every other week. It's just a meeting between superintendents where often the public health officer joins us. Just the 17 school districts in Alameda, whatever the number is, I think it's 17 school districts in Alameda County. It's just those leaders. The other call is a broader call. So we get information routinely from the public health department. We also participate in calls pretty much on a weekly basis with the Department of Education, and they provide information from the State Department of Health. So we are collecting information. It feels like sometimes all day long, every day. And sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's maddening because it's so, it's vague. We would love for them to tell us, do this, do that, but they're not, number one, they're not going to give us that type of direction because every local government, including the school district, has the ability and the responsibility for making those decisions locally. So we provide that, we take that information, we synthesize that information, we provide updates to the board on a regular basis as to what we're learning. I don't know, Ed, do you want to add to that in terms of the EOC with the city? And
yeah, I mean, I don't think I have too much more to add, but the City Emergency Operations Center staff and myself try to go to that meeting every week. And so we get updates from the city of Pleasanton, which is obviously very specific to the data that's coming particularly for Pleasanton. So yeah, that's just another area or another place that we can get information to help us make decisions.
I just had one more thing. Could you just articulate, like, in a couple sentences, why the decision is to go remote only?
So when we saw or got the information, so last Thursday, I can just take you through my personal experience of last week through the weekend. So on Thursday of last week, the communication from the public health director was that they were leaning towards issuing guidance that would encourage districts to reopen as it's safe and feasible within their local context. That information never came. Instead, what came was the Alameda County directing the communities to pull back on some of the restrictions that they had loosened. And then on Sunday, we had the governor adding Alameda County to the watch list, which is generally speaking, once you're on the watch list, you're on the watch list. You have to be on it for 3 days, but then once you're on it for 3 weeks. And so, when I started thinking about that on Sunday, that put us to pretty much 2 days before school was supposed to start, before we would be taken off of the watch list and we would have any forward motion on a plan. That's not fair to our families. It's not fair to our teachers. It's not fair to the kids, frankly, to have no real direction until we get 2 days before school.
But I mean, what I'm hearing though is that if we could ensure safety of the students, teachers, staff, etc., we could open our schools to some modified, thing. I think what I'm hearing you say, Dr. Haglund, is we don't think we can offer that level of safety given the outbreak, the scenario that we're in this county, even though it's true, Pleasanton may be different than other areas, but that's not how the guidance is given by the city. But we don't think we can provide the level of safety to satisfy all the constituents within our school district at this point in time.
So I would say it differently. Mark, I couldn't bring that recommendation to you with a clean conscience.
Dave,
So I'm
maybe
bringing forward the recommendation that I believe we can implement.
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
Mark,
I agree.
I also am concerned that less than a month ago or so, Pleasanton maybe had 43 cases, and I've looked at it daily. We are now up to 165. Livermore, that was behind us, is now up to 318. I see the COVID-19 increasing. If it was going the other way, then I would be thinking differently possibly, but it appears that it's going up the other way. And so we have to get a handle on this. And, people can say, well, students aren't affected, they're this, they're that. But our parents, as our kids come back to school, as they open up more work, they travel to areas that are very impacted, like Hayward and Fremont and Santa Clara, which then comes back. And so in good conscience, I'm like, Dave, I can't foresee opening up right now to exposing our students and our staff that will be there. Because many of them have wives, parents that live with them, children that are compromised. And I certainly don't want to put them in that situation.
No, I would say that, to make my thinking visible on this, I really would like to open up the schools and get the kids back in the schools. I absolutely think that is, if we could possibly find a way. But from what I'm hearing, I can't ignore the concerns that people have. And we're hearing a lot of concerns. And so I can't in good conscience say that this is the right time to bring everybody back to school, or even on a hybrid method, bringing people back to school yet, because people just aren't comfortable with it yet. And there is a real risk. So as much as I want want the kids to be in school, and I want things to, be as close to normal as possible. I just don't think we can do it right now. It's there's just too much risk, and people just are not ready to have that happen.
Well, I don't want to sound, I have been sounding more negative than perhaps people expected of me today. This is, I've been struggling with this decision for a couple of weeks, actually. And as you can tell from my comments, I consider getting especially younger kids back in school as really very important. And for reasons that were discussed by some parents who not only spoke tonight, but who also have emailed us and talked to us in the community. And so the decision always is as an individual board member. So, you're taking that into consideration as well as the staff's recommendation in order to decide how you're going to vote on something. And for me, I'm going to support this recommendation with my vote, but there's a big caveat to it. I absolutely need to see, I really don't want to get the calls from parents and emails from parents with an experience like what the parent relayed tonight, where their student wasn't ever contacted, there was no follow-up. We had so much stuff in the spring that was so problematic that we just had to kind of accept because it was, so new, and we were, just running as fast as we could to get this done. But I really want assurances from administration that those check-ins about actual instruction happening, actual, Zoom real time with students, all of the things that were talked about in the plan. I don't want to see students having a completely wasted however many months this is going to be. And I want us to update regularly. If it's, in the weekend update, Dr. Haglund, about what you're learning, on the calls, which I know you already do now, but in particular, how it would relate to us bringing back students safely. It isn't just, and I don't want teachers to think that I don't care about them. I do. This is a serious disease that the virus, even if you don't get a acute case that causes, or if you get a case and you recover, for years, you have other symptoms and other things that are going on. I'm not making light of that, but we have classified members who've been working all along, and we're asking them to work with our students, and we're asking them to work in our offices, and we're doing it as safely as we can possibly do it, but we do have a school district to run. So, and our main mission is to educate students. So I'm going to support the recommendation based based largely on what I consider to be, again, the thoughtful work and, all-encompassing work by so many stakeholders that put together the plan and the recommendation, because I respect that work. But these are my concerns, and I want to make sure that we're not going to lose, we're not going to have students go for, a quarter with no real learning growth. So.
Okay. Any other comment? Question?
Steve,
I do.
Jamie, do you want? Here, I'll go first.
Okay.
I agree with what was said, what Joan just said about having, monitoring the effectiveness of the instruction. There does need to be meaningful, effective instruction with our kids, and she's right. We don't know how long this is going to go on. So I think that is something that's a directive that I think we need to have, and we need to support that. I do think, though, that at this time, with the with what the COVID crisis is right now, I think it's only responsible of us to not have the reopening of schools yet. You know, there are more younger people getting this disease, and kids can be carriers of it with parents, grandparents, just as everybody described. And, you know, and our teachers would be exposed, our classified employees would be exposed a lot on a daily basis. And this is something that, you know, if anything would happen to any of our employees, any of our kids or family members of our kids, I mean, I'd never forgive myself. So I think we do need to take that stand. And unfortunately, and like Mark said, you know, we all, I really wish we could have our kids get back to school. Our kids want to get back to school. And I think you know, and I've heard from teachers want to get back to school.
I want to get back to school.
We all want to get back to school. I don't think that's it. We all want that to happen, but it really isn't safe to do so yet. So I will support the motion, and I'll leave it at that. So Trustee Yee, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, you know, I had sent an email to Dr. Woodward over the weekend, I think, and that was one of the things that I really said, you know, I don't want to hear and what are we doing about, you know, the kids that got no instruction. I mean, that just was not right. But I kind of alluded to this before, is that, and I think Joan said it too, we're going into this with a way different expectation. So even if we weren't going full-time remote, you know, we still have the hybrid model and the Flex Academy, there would still be an expectation about how does the remote piece look and how is it really getting implemented and how is it being monitored. And that's why I asked the question about how are the principals going to be doing their observations the way that they did before. I mean, and that's why I said we can't lose any of our principals. We need them to not get recruited anywhere because they know their staff, and it would be really difficult for a new principal to be managing a school virtually. At least our principals know who all their staff are. So I just, you know, this monitoring and the implementation is, you know, is really, really, really key. But I really feel for the people who do need to get back to work, who are going to have childcare issues, who don't know how to do this at home. I mean, if I was in that situation, I would be going crazy. I would be terrible at teaching my kids. So I feel really, really, really bad about that. And, you know, and we do look at our whole state and it's different, and Pleasanton numbers are different than everybody else. But like Steve said, you know, people are driving and traveling to different places for work and things are, you know, spreading around. We just don't know what could happen. If we could just contain Pleasanton, that would be a different story, but that's completely unrealistic. So, you know, as hard as this is, and I agonize, but I probably heard more from more people who wanted full-time remote than to go back. And then the other big thing I heard was, yes, full-time remote. However, we really need to have, you know, good instruction and good engagement. So, you know, and I'm agreeing with Joan, that really is our directive. We're going into this remote learning, but we got to bring it. We got to bring our world-class, you know, game to the remote learning, because we can't have any of our kids lose any of their instruction. Our readers got to be able to read. Our kids got to be able to learn their chemistry and their Spanish and their ASL, you know, whatever. And this is what we do. This is our business. We got to teach the kids and they got to graduate. So, you know, as hard as this decision is, I feel supportive of it too, but we just, you know, we really got to bring our A game.
Okay, before we take a motion, Janelle, I would encourage you again to make sure that we have teacher classes so that everyone and not anyone can say, well, I didn't know, or I don't know how to do something. We want to make sure that every instructor knows how to do it.
Yes, agree. Thank you.
Okay, and if you need money, you come to us. We'll find it. Okay, do I have a motion?
Ahmad has to get up off the floor. I
will find it. We're not hiring any subs. There's some money there. Okay, hopefully. Okay, so do I have a motion?
All right. Well, you know what? I've got the big mouth. I'll go ahead and I will make a motion to support staff's recommendation to begin schooling in remote learning with then reassessment to move into the models as described in the presentation.
I'll second.
Okay, Trustee Larson,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Yee,
Aye.
Trustee Arkin,
Aye.
and Trustee Maher, aye. Motion carries. Okay, I don't have my, it's 10:14, so we gotta get going. Number six,
Trustee Maher, can I just, can we have a quick 5-minute bio break?
is that okay with everybody? Okay, it is now 10:15, 10:20, we will start back.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back. Next item is number 7, consent agenda. 7.1, approval of the contract between the Pleasanton Unified School District and NWEA from July 15th, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. And Patrick, or first I should ask, is there any board comment or questions?
I believe we had two comments, but the individuals already spoke on our last item. They combined their comments, so we are good to go on 7.1. No public comments.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Trustee Larson?
Aye.
Trustee Yee?
Aye.
Trustee Arkin?
Aye.
Trustee Miller?
Aye.
Trustee Maher? Aye. Motion carries. Okay, 8, report discussion and a report discussion and possible action. Ahmad, you're on.
Great. Thank you very much. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I will do my best to be concise and not take too much time. And
Can somebody turn their notifications off? Do you guys hear that dinging? Or is it just me?
We hear it.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, mine's off.
Mine's off. Great. Notification turn off check. So I'll cover the, we'll go through the executive summary, cover the multi-year projections, and then review the enacted state budget and some of the implications and the work that we're doing in updating the budget, as well as a revised budget reduction plan that is now been updated based on our new budget that we're developing. So we all are very familiar with the pandemic and the impacts to the state budget. In order to prepare for that, the board held 3 public study sessions to discuss the budget and reduction planning. So we were very proactive in this. We initiated input gathering from various stakeholders, including leadership and outside of the district through the Superintendent's Budget Advisory Council. We built a budget based on the May revise, which was a more conservative model to ensure that we were prepared for what the budget would finally look like. The adopted budget, which was approved in June 25th, does include $11 million of reductions from our baseline budget. And even with that level of reductions, we will still be deficit spending about $6 million. The enacted budget does include significant changes, which the main part of it is the LCFF, which drives our funding, has been restored to 1920 levels. However, that is still a cut to all school districts because it has no cost of living, while our cost of living while our expenditures do continue to increase. So that is a reduction from what we were originally planning in our second interim for 1920. The way the governor and the state is handling that is they are basically doing $11 billion of deferrals for that fiscal year starting in February 21. And I'll go through that and the impacts to the district. In addition, there is funding for significant funding for one-time funding for the learning loss mitigation funds. And those are the funds that'll help pay for a lot of the professional development and distance learning that we need to support. So there is funding for that specifically. The staff is preparing the 45-day budget. It will be brought to August 13th, which is exactly 45 days from the time the governor signed the budget in late June. And we're still trying to target a reduction level of about 6 to 6.5 million. It is slightly higher than I had indicated previously, and I'll talk to you why we're increasing the level of reduction that we need. We'll factor in the one-time funds, other losses and expenses that we anticipate as well. Again, the plan is to ensure the district's long-term financial stability and solvency while meeting the needs of our students today. Won't go through this complicated chart because you've seen it many times, but this is the basis of our adopted budget, which was based on a conservative model. We have the new information and are working to plug it into our model, which does include a restoration of the 1920 funding levels, as well as other factors that are in our favor. I want to show this chart again. This is based on the adopted budget, that even with the $11 million of reductions and the reduced revenues, we were still short by $6 million. And so we want to be really cognizant of that going forward, that even with the increased revenues, we can't get away from all of the reductions because we'd still be deficit spending. So the other good news, again, we indicated that restoring the funding to the 1920 and the 0% COLA will restore about $11 million. No reductions to the categorical programs. However, that is being done through deferrals. And deferrals, as we discussed in the last meeting, is graphically shown here. So the first deferral is already in play. However, it's a very short deferral. The funding, the state disperses its funding on a monthly basis through an apportionment for each school district. And you receive that about 9% each month. In the summer months, it drops about 5%. And so in the month of June, we didn't receive the funds that we typically would receive. And so we received it in July. We were able to meet our payroll and other obligations for the month of June because the district financial situation remains healthy and our reserve rates at this point in time is healthy. However, looking into the next fiscal year, the $11 billion of deferrals will start in February, with about $1.54 billion being deferred from February to November 21. Similar deferrals will be made all the way through June, and you can see the repayment plan that they have currently scheduled. This level of deferrals, the district will need to look at outside funding to be able to manage its cash flow. So we're already starting to initiate that process, talking to our financial advisors at Keygent to help us map out our cash flow needs. So that is something that is really in the forefront of our thinking, is about our cash flow. I do want to point out that if the federal government does come through, that $11 billion of deferral will probably be reduced to about $5.5 billion. So there'll still be some level of deferrals, but not to the extent that is currently planned. And then the challenge of the deferrals and the future state funding, this is a slide that I added. And what I wanted to really show in this slide was the state had about a $54 billion shortfall in the fiscal year that we just started. And the way they managed this shortfall is they dipped into their reserves, the rainy fund reserves. They've done different borrowing and transfer, about $9.3 million. They've revised some of their revenues, which we have to see if they materialize. They're relying on one-time federal funds for about $10 billion. They've canceled expansion and updated other assumptions for another $10.6 billion. And then finally, they're relying on these deferrals and reductions for another $11 billion. That $11 billion of deferrals is really affecting the K-12 education. And it's the long-term challenge is going to be, what is the state's financial recovery going into 21-22 and beyond? Because the state has to recover back to its 1920 levels to avoid further reductions. It'll have to recover beyond that to pay the deferrals that it has created for the current fiscal year. And so the last time we went through this in the Great Recession that had to do with the housing and banking sector, it took about a decade to recover and repay those deferrals. So that's more our concern is in the out years, and whatever we do now really will help us in the out year planning. Again, we talked about the one-time mitigation funds. This slide really shows that the district will receive somewhere about $5.2 million from different sources, mostly federal funding and some state. They do have a very tight requirement in terms of what we can spend it. However, the spending does go back to last fiscal year starting in March or March 13th, and it runs mainly through December 30th, 2020. A small portion of it does run a little bit longer. So we at the fiscal team are looking at our expenditures last year, and any expenditures that were done in the distance learning and professional development that fit those criteria will move into from this, and it'll help free up monies in the last fiscal year. We also are working with teaching and learning and student services to develop the plan for the expenditures into the current fiscal year, ensuring that we do have professional development, support programs, and such. And so the left is is a summary of the language that's in the legislation of SB 98. And in the right are some examples that those funds can be used for. And so we will look at summer school. We will look at support for academic support, softwares, devices. Tonight we have there is an item for us to be able to purchase additional devices so we can fully support the one-to-one program at the K-5. And so we are looking at those funds for those purchases as well. So that's going to be critical work. This plan needs to be submitted for approval by September 30th. Other benefits in it is that there's temporary relief in STRS and PERS. And in this graph here, you'll see what the level of pension contributions that we are responsible for our teachers and for our classified employees. And they were going to increase to 18.4% and then go back down to 18.1%. However, with the governor's budget, we are now looking at a reprieve for 2 years. However, the out years, they'll increase to a slightly higher level than was previously planned. And it's this jump that we have to plan for in that third year of our multi-year budget planning. A similar situation in CalPERS. There is still an increase. However, it's less significant than what was planned. And then again, that it does go back up significantly in that third year. We talked about there is some protection for staff in terms of the layoff windows. And one of the categories of classified employees includes nutrition, transportation, and custodial services, that those groups cannot be laid off. And so that will slightly impact us in the area of child nutrition now. So in child nutrition, we have a small free and reduced subset. It's about 10%. And so mainly we are able to keep child nutrition at cost neutral through the paid lunches. And so now that we're going to be going into distance learning or hybrid mode, we are going to still have pretty much the same staffing level and expenditures. Some food costs may be down, but the majority of the cost in child nutritional services is in staffing. However, the revenue sources are going to be highly impacted. And so it will be probably losing somewhere close to $2 million. Again, we are looking at various ways we can be creative to be able to attract sales for lunches, but it will not be the same. And so the Child Nutritional Services does have some reserves in their fund, but potentially will have to maybe about $1 million the general fund will need to support Child Nutritional Services in that area. There is a hold harmless and instructional minute provisions. We've discussed some of those before, but the ADA for funding purposes will be the 1920 P2 levels, and flexibility in the minutes will be provided, as has been discussed by teaching and learning. The district does have to develop a continuity plan, a learning continuity plan, an attendance plan, and have that approved by the board by September 30th. And there is both community and public engagement in that process. And the plan will cover a lot of the topics that we've been discussing and how the funds will help support our efforts in those areas. So our plan is to ensure to the best we can a balanced budget. We'll be looking at about half of what we were before in terms of about $6 to $6.5 million of reductions, and we'll go into some of those details in the next few slides. We want to maintain our reserve levels to help us with some of our cash flow needs, but more importantly, to help us be prepared for the reductions in the out years. And that will be really critical. We want to make reductions to increase our organizational efficiency, and also to limit those to active positions and salaries. So we've made adjustments to really be really cognizant of these goals. So a couple of other things that we're doing, again, we talked about we have to direct one-time funds to one-time expenditures and develop that plan. Think about the future as we look at these. We will update the budget to reflect the school opening plan in terms of PPE costs, additional cleaning and custodial services, as well as incorporating our budget updates for the other funds, and specifically child nutrition, which we discussed, and also Kids Club, STEAM, and Horizon. And these two funds really rely on either sales or tuition to make them whole. And so in Kids Club, we're going to have to look at the model. Can we expand? What will the cohorts look like? What will the space use be? And in order to ensure that that fund is also remains either in the positive or a break-even point. So I'm going to switch to the reduction planning and the adjustments that we have made in the reduction planning. And so again, these were the framework that we've really looked at. The reduction planning and the adjustments that we've made have been based on these 6 bullet points. We've looked at 5 levers, both the non-personnel and then through salary reductions, and then C and D are both impact positions, but from a different angle. And we also want to look at increasing revenues. We actually see that increasing revenues is a long-term plan, and working with our partners at PPI and other interested members within the community, we can look at increasing donations, and potentially looking at a community-led targeted parcel tax that will help us through some of the difficult years that lay ahead. So at the end of September, which now feels like a long time ago, but it was only a few weeks ago, we proposed a plan that had identified about $10.83 million of reduction in these various categories. The plan that we are currently evaluating and refining has made significant modifications and is looking at about a $6.83 million reduction and looking at increasing revenues about $300,000. This slide here basically recommends moving forward with all of the non-personnel area reductions. And some of these, again, are 1 to 2 year, and not all of them are ongoing. We feel confident that these reductions won't impact, will have the least amount of impact to our students, and should move forward with them for this current year. In terms of the salary reductions, we are looking at 9, 10, 11, which are at the discretion of the district to reduce overtime and to tighten up some of our discretionary stipends, as well as the management side of the Golden Handshake. However, in terms of the furloughs, we would like to negotiate both with CSCA and the Teachers Association furloughs only if the federal funds do not materialize. And that is because if the federal funds do not materialize, the size of the deferrals will be so large that they will, in essence, be large cuts to the district, especially as it impacts the out years. So that's something that is currently not in this plan. However, we do feel that if the federal funds do not materialize, that's something we would like to revisit. In terms of items C and D, which have to do with positions, we've gone through the list and made some modifications and really minimized and tightened things up. So in terms of bringing as much work in-house to lessen the impacts of special education, we will do that as a benefit to our students and for our staff. We talked about the substitutes and the roving substitutes that can be eliminated, freezing the position and the PIO position. There's no staff member currently in it. We are going to reallocate the LCAP funding at the district level because we don't see the need. However, it's not a direct cut because the 1920 funding levels were maintained. Reducing the general fund allocation to the CTE program. Again, those won't affect programs in terms of classes and positions. It's a tightening up of some of their discretionary funding. We are moving forward with the reorganization of the graphics department and some restructuring in the fiscal and operations as well. We had proposed a 4 FTE reduction in support staff district and some site, and we are tightening up that to 3.625 FTE positions that are currently vacant. So again, in that line item, there won't be any current staff members that will be having to be laid off. It is open positions. In terms of the restructuring of the district and site management, we adjusted that to 2 FTE. There will be no reductions in site level administrators, and the 2 positions at the district are currently been consolidated or are vacant. We still want to look at savings in the library area. However, we'll allow that opportunity to be investigated for efficiencies, and for our planning purposes are not looking at capturing those dollars right now. We have met and discussed with both our middle school and high school principals, tightening up of some of the extra extended periods and closing some of the vacancies. And so we're still refining these, but we have tightened them up and provided some FTE back to the sites at those areas. We're still pursuing to tighten up our staffing to match our class sizes in the elementaries, so that we will maintain the 1 to 24 in K3 and 1 to 33 in grades 4 or 5. And that can still be accomplished by reducing 8 FTE at the elementary grades. We have removed any reductions or repurposing our specialists. We feel that our specialists in this time can be utilized in a wide variety of ways to help support distance learning and our needs. So we have removed that from the reduction plan. And we discussed, again, we're going to maximize any carryover grants that we have from the federal government that extended some programs that we had not spent down, as well as talking to PPIE in allowing us to maximize utilizing some of the PSEE gift funds on music and STEM programs. So our next steps is to take feedback from the board in any direction and to incorporate these into a detailed budget. We're closing the books for our unaudited actuals. We'll bring back the 45-day budget revision for the board to approve on the 13th. And then in September, we'll bring the 1920 unaudited actuals also for approval. And then by the end of September, we'll have to also have had the board approve our continuity and attendance plan for this fiscal year as well. So that is the presentation. And I think I did it in 30 minutes. I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll have discussions, comments before we go to public comments. Is there any comments by the board? Questions? Jamie?
Yeah, I just have one quick question. Do you know if we're now that we're going to this full-time remote for, I don't know, the next few months or however long, how much do we, I mean, I feel like we must save money from not occupying our school sites. Is there any savings from not physically being there?
It's a great question. And it's been very challenging to plan for this because we have to plan for, going back to school and the increased cost. And so, and we also have to plan for some of the modifications that might happen if we don't go back. So we've really struggled on how to approach that, but we have put in dollars for additional cleaning and materials and supplies. And so we have built some of that. I felt that it may have been a little bit, that it may not have been enough at sometimes because you get different reports and you look at the numbers. And so it's a real balancing act because in about a month we can be, okay, things are much better. We have to go fully back. And then we need more custodial support or we need more cleaning supplies. And then then the question will be, well, did we plan to put that in, right? And so you have to put a certain level, and then if you don't spend it early on, you may end up spending it more later. So it's been a real challenge to really balance those out. But some of the savings, again, we talked about the roving subs and some of the other things we kind of foresaw. But in terms of cleaning and janitorial and PPE, we want to be very careful and to have those costs in there so that if we do, and hopefully we do go back to as much in person, we're ready for it.
Yeah, but we must be saving on electricity and water.
we
With nobody there.
We will save on those. And the way I see that is any type of savings operationally, as you said, electricity, water, right, or less, purchasing of some of the PPE. And one of the things we're doing with PPE, we're costing it out as to what will it cost for the whole year, but we're buying a 60 to 90 day supply. So we're not overstocking, right? Because we'll see what we'll use, how it'll go, and we'll always have a good cushion, but not to say, oh, we have, a full year supply of PPE that would not be wise, and also it would be a storage issue and so on and so forth. So as we realize some of those savings or as their costs increase, I think that will help our ending fund balance, and any help in our ending fund balance today will help us with less reductions in the out years. And that's the key to our budget planning, is that tough times are ahead of us, and we have to prepare today.
Any other questions, Jamie?
Just a really quick question. So tax receipts are due tomorrow. Are we expecting the legislature to do anything with that information that we would have to take into consideration in our 45-day revise, or would we expect any of those adjustments to come later?
Those adjustments will probably come later. It'll take, they'll obviously have to, sift through the data and look at it. And then if there's any significant, they probably have modeled some of this stuff into their planning, their loss of, the $54 billion loss. However, if if they've underestimated it or if they've overestimated it, we will know that information, and then that will get reflected in kind of their planning. We hope and we don't expect mid-year budget adjustments, but you never know. I mean, this model that the state has developed is based on a certain level of recovery. And if we lapse back into a harder type of shutdown, if those things happen, it will then probably be different than their model. And then I'm sure we'll be having further discussions. Again, I believe all of the pain will be seen in the coming years because they've done a lot of things to get us through this current year, but at some point it catches up to you, right? And I think what they were trying to do was buy everyone a little bit of a safety zone while everyone kind of figured things out for the next fiscal year.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, Patrick, are there any public comments?
President Maher, we do not have any public comments on this item.
Okay. Again, this information.
This was just information. Any specific direction you can provide me now, or you can provide it in the weeks to come through the superintendent. And we will bring back the budget based on what we've indicated here and further work that needs to occur, especially around planning for the expenditure of the one-time funds.
Thank you.
So, Ahmad, just real quick. So, to me, this is a no-brainer in terms of my support, because I think you've done a great job of coming up with ideas that are at least impactful to students and so forth. I really appreciate the work doing that. So thank you.
Thank you. And you did a great job with the levers, ones you had to pull and ones you didn't.
Thank you. Thank you. The team, everyone really at both the executive cabinet, the superintendent, and the fiscal services team, and all the departments really pulling together, and not everyone just laying everything on the table and really discussing. Was a cooperative and interactive process, and appreciate the support of the board as well.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, 8.2, Dr. Woodward.
Thank you, Steve. Is it a Maher?
Steve's fine.
Okay, the item before you is approval of the contract between the Pleasanton Unified School District and Illuminate Education. And presenting this evening will be Dr. Pam Vandekamp. Dr. Vandekamp?
You got 10 minutes.
She's got it in 8.
Pam?
I apologize. I'm trying to get my time in. So good evening again. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you about Illuminate Education, our educational intelligence platform. Our assessment analyst, Glenn Galiste, is here with me tonight to address any questions you might have regarding our presentation. He manages the back end and knows intimately all of the ins and outs of Illuminate. So California state standards determine what we expect students to learn, and the Illuminate education platform aligns with our district organizational goals by providing access to data and data analysis tools that assist teachers and administrators in answering the question, how will we know what students are learning? In Pleasanton Unified, we use Illuminate for many purposes to capture and provide reports of student demographics, state and local assessments, as well as multiple accountability reports. In addition, Illuminate provides reports and data and analysis for other site and district responsibilities. For example, student improvement plans and 504 plans. Teachers are able to create common formative assessments in Illuminate and review student progress towards meeting benchmarks. In order to expand our services for our staff, we have identified additional actions that we can take within the coming year, including providing resources to assist in remote learning. And so at this time, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
I just had a question. Is this, I know we're getting some additional features, but is this contract amount in line with what we've paid to ORS and Illuminate?
Yes.
I
before?
believe so, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns? Is there any public comment? Patrick?
President Maher, there's no public comment on this item.
Okay, this is an action item.
I just have one quick something just from our past experience. So there's not a possibility that Illuminate is going to be acquired or go out of business?
No, Illuminate is actually acquiring other entities and partnering with other entities. So they are now partners with Google Classroom and Aries. For example, they've acquired IO and FastBridge. So they are acquiring other entities rather than being subsumed by them.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll go ahead and move approval of 8.2, approving the contract between Pleasanton Unified and Illuminate Education from July 15, 2020 to June 30th, 2023.
Second?
I'll second.
Second.
Trustee Arkin?
Aye.
Trustee Miller?
Aye.
Trustee Larson?
Aye.
Trustee Yee?
Aye.
And Trustee Meyer, aye. Motion passes. Just now to 8.3. Ahmed will introduce Amy to help highlight this item. Ahmed?
Sorry about that. I got caught in the mute world. I am going to introduce Amy Nichols, our Senior Director of Technology and Procurement, who will introduce item 8.3.
Thank you, Ahmed.
Good evening, members of the board, cabinet, and community. Tonight, I am requesting authority from the board to procure approximately 3,000 devices for our elementary students, TK5, as well as our preschool students. The administration makes this recommendation in response to the language that is included in SB 98 regarding the parameters that must be in place for distance learning in the 2020-21 school year. One of these requirements is that we must confirm that all students have access to devices and internet connectivity that will support distance learning. In conjunction with the purchase of devices for our secondary students that this board approved on May 7th, 2020, we believe the purchase we are recommending tonight will allow us to best meet this requirement. We recommend the use of the Federal CARES Act funding for this purchase, not the general fund or the bond. I wish to take a moment to explain why we are not presenting you with an actual purchase, a quote, to approve tonight, and are instead seeking authority to purchase devices at a cost not to exceed $1.2 million. Our goal is to procure devices that can arrive as soon as possible. In preparation for this meeting, we obtained proposals, but the items then became unavailable as we prepared this board agenda. As a result of this pandemic, many vendors have very limited supplies of Chromebooks, and they are sold very quickly after they are manufactured. If you approve this delegation of authority, the administration will proceed with placing orders over the next several days from vendors who have stock available for delivery as soon as possible. The board will have the opportunity to review and ratify all purchases at future board meetings as a part of the routine purchase order agenda items that are included on the consent agenda. As we have done for the past several years for our secondary students, we will survey families to determine if they need a device or if they would prefer to bring their own device or use their own device. This survey will be included in the same process that Janelle spoke about earlier tonight, where we will ask our families to make their final school choice for the 2020-21 school year. This data will be used to determine how we will manage and schedule the distribution of devices to our elementary and preschool families as we open school. With that, I'd like to turn this back to you, President Maher, for any discussion or comments and the board's consideration of the recommended action.
Is there any public comment, Patrick?
Steve, we do have one. Kelly McCaughey, if she's still with us, she did submit a public comment for this item.
Okay, Kelly?
All right, good evening, guys. I'm Kelly McCaughey, a candidate to serve on the PSD Board of Trustees. Right now, I'd like to speak as a parent of 2 elementary age children who will need to use Chromebooks to work appropriately through remote learning. I request that the trustees of the board and the PSD leadership team to make sure to consider what technology usage policies need to be modified and updated, specifically for the use for our early learners, and to consider best practices for how to use technology appropriately at such tender young ages. I would like to also reiterate that if not already in place, please consider what needs to be made in order to communicate with teachers and parents about the negative dangers of the overuse of technology on youth development, physiologically, mentally, socially, and emotionally. I'm not really referring specifically to cyberbullying, but I would like to talk a little bit more about some other negative consequences effective when children are using extensive time and hours with screen time, which naturally will be increased exponentially with remote learning. Awareness first, training, resources, and support for everyone, including our parents, our teachers, and for our students. Please take that in consideration. And also, I would like to conclude and applaud for the purchase of these Chromebooks because we know that it will be essential for all children. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kelly. Is there any comment or question by the board?
I have a question, Steve. Amy, so normally when we are doing a Chromebook purchase, we're going through, say CDW, and we're using the white glove service as well. So being that we're going to be possibly purchasing from multiple vendors, are we going to be able to access a white glove service for all of those, or are we going to ask our tech staff to do that?
Our current thinking is that we will ask our tech staff to do that. Given the speed at which we've put this project together, we have not had the opportunity to engage in the meet and confer with the tech staff or the unions to verify that the tech staff would like to do this work and are going to be able to do it given the rest of the duties that they will have in front of them. A delegation of authority also will give us the opportunity to engage in that process over the next several days as we're unfolding this proposal.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion?
I move approval of 8.3, the purchase of the Chromebooks. Authorization to purchase.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Trustee Yee?
Aye.
Trustee Larson?
Aye.
Trustee Arkin?
Aye.
Trustee Miller? And Trustee Maher, aye. Motion passes. Okay, 8.4, Ahmad.
Great, thank you very much. So 8.4 is we continue to proceed very well with the Leidixon Rebuild project, and taking advantage of the summer months, we would like to continue the work that we have going. So I'm going to turn this over to our Director of Facilities and Construction that will go through item 8.4, which is approval of the lease amendment 3 for Robert A. Bothman. John?
Thank you, Ahmad. I'll go through this pretty quickly. I can make it less than 10 minutes. Good evening, members of the board, cabinet, and the community. Tonight, we're bringing forward for consideration the third of 4 planned amendments for the site work scope of for Robert A. Bothman. The approval of the Amendment 3 will allow the next scope of site work to continue through the summer with the goal of reducing time on the project schedule. The Legth rebuild project construction is continuing in 2 separate construction contracts. One is site work with the Bothman contractor, and the other is the building with a JLM contractor. Tonight, we're just talking about the Bothman site work contract. A little bit of history. Back in November of 2019, the board awarded the contract to Bothman, and subsequently with February and March, 2 amendments were approved by the board for the lease-leaseback amendments. Tonight, we're proposing a third amendment of the 4 planned amendments, which is approximately, excuse me, 1.5 million. And it roughly covers about half of the site work scope of the project, which is about 8.8 million for the half. Our goal is to get a total site work budget of 17 million. So we still have one more amendment that we anticipate will be just over 8 million. Fortunately, the bid market right now is coming in pretty good on things, but we have to wait to see how this works out. To date, we have reduced about $2 million in value engineering items through the amendments 1 through 3. We're going to continue focusing on reducing the costs of the final amendment once we get the amendment and such, and the scope of work identified. The remainder of the project continues to trend on budget in any of the other categories. So tonight, the recommended action, administration requests the Board of Trustees to authorize the staff to enter into the lease agreement number 3 with Robert A. Bothman.
Okay. And I take it we have no comments from the public, Patrick?
No, Steve, no public comments.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval of 8.4.
I'll second.
Okay. Trustee Larson?
Aye.
Trustee Miller?
Aye.
Trustee Yee?
Aye.
Trustee Arkin?
Aye.
Trustee Meyer, aye. Okay, this brings us to the end of the meeting. Before we go on, we do have a facilities meeting on Thursday, Ahmad?
Yes, we do. We'll have a complete update, and the community can join in that update as well. It is a public meeting, and we will also make that available to the rest of the board. There's 2 board members who sit on that committee along with the staff and the superintendent.
Okay, can you remind us of the time?
I will. Let me just look at my calendar. It is at 5:30, and it will be on Zoom, and you can access that through our website by going on the committee meetings.
Thank you, Ahmad. And I believe our next board meeting is August 13th, David?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Unless we have one in between. You have to go. Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Everyone get some rest. A nice job by everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Good job.
Night.